Welcome back everyone to our reading of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. At the end of Chapter 8, Part 1, we got up to the part where Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are telling the 4 children about Aslan and also about the White Witch and how she isn't really human and would be very interested in there being 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve in Narnia. All the children had been attending so hard to what Mr. Beaver was telling them that they had noticed nothing else for a long time. Then, during the moment of silence that followed his last remark, Lucy suddenly said, "I say, where's Edmund?" There was a dreadful pause, and then everyone began asking, "Well, who saw him last? How long has he been missing? Is he outside?" And then all rushed to the door and looked out. The snow was falling thickly and steadily. The green ice of the pool had vanished under a thick white blanket, and from where the little house stood in the centre of the dam, you could hardly see either bank. Out they went, plunging well over their ankles into the soft new snow, and went around the house in every direction. "Edmund! Edmund!" they called till they were hoarse. But the silently falling snow seemed to muffle their voices, and there was not even an echo in answer. There's a picture of the 3 children without Edmund and the beavers calling out for Edmund. "How perfectly dreadful," said Susan as they at last came back in despair. "Oh, how I wish we'd never come." "What on earth are we to do, Mr. Beaver?" said Peter. "Do?" said Mr. Beaver, who was already putting on his snow boots. "Do? We must be off at once. We haven't a moment to spare." "We'd better divide into 4 search parties," said Peter, "and all go in different directions. Whoever finds him must come back here at once and—" "Search parties, son of Adam," said Mr. Beaver. "What for?" "Why, to look for Edmund, of course." "There's no point in looking for him," said Mr. Beaver. "What do you mean?" said Susan. "He can't be far away yet, and we've got to find him." "What do you mean when you say there's no use looking for him?" "The reason there's no use looking," said Mr. Beaver, "is that we already know where he's gone." Everyone stared in amazement. "Don't you understand?" said Mr. Beaver. "He's gone to her, to the White Witch. He's betrayed us all." "Oh, surely." "Oh, really?" said Susan. "He can't have done that." "Can't he?" said Mr. Beaver, looking very hard at the 3 children, and everything they wanted to say dried on their lips, for each felt suddenly quite certain inside that this was exactly what Edmund had done. "But will he know the way?" said Peter. "Has he been in this country before?" asked Mr. Beaver. "Has he ever been here alone?" "Yes," said Lucy, almost in a whisper. "I'm afraid he has." "And did he tell you what he'd done or who he'd met?" "Well, no, he didn't," said Lucy. "Then mark my words," said Mr. Beaver. "He has already met the White Witch and joined her side, and has been told where she lives. I didn't like to mention it before, he being your brother and all, but the moment I set eyes on that brother of yours, I said to myself, 'Treacherous.' He had the look of one who has been with the witch and eaten her food. You can always tell them if you've lived long in Narnia. Something about their eyes." "All the same," said Peter in a rather choking sort of voice, "we'll still have to go and look for him. He's our brother after all, even if he is rather a little beast, and he's only a kid." "Go to the witch's house?" said Mrs. Beaver. "Don't you see that the only chance of saving either himself or yourselves is to keep away from her?" "Well, how do you mean?" said Lucy. "Why, all she wants is to get all 4 of you. She's thinking all the time of those 4 thrones at Cair Paravel. Once you were all 4 inside her house, her job would be done. And there'd be 4 new statues in her collection before you'd had time to think. But she'll keep him alive as long as he's the only one she's got, because she'll want to use him as a decoy, as bait to catch the rest of you with." "Oh, can no one help us?" wailed Lucy. "Only Aslan," said Mr. Beaver. "You go on and meet him. That's our only chance now." "Seems to me, my dears," said Mrs. Beaver, "that it is very important to know just when he slipped away. How much he can tell her depends on how much he heard. For instance, had we started talking of Aslan before he left? If not, then he may not do very well, for she won't know that Aslan has come to Narnia or that we are meeting him, and will be quite off her guard as far as that is concerned. I don't remember his being here when we were talking about Aslan, began Peter, but Lucy interrupted him. Oh, yes, he was, she said miserably. Don't you remember? It was he who asked whether the witch couldn't turn Aslan into stone too. Oh, so he did, by Jove, said Peter. Just the sort of thing he'd say too. Worse and worse, said Mr. Beaver. And the next thing is this. Was he still here when I told you that the place for meeting Aslan was the stone table? And of course, no one knew the answer to this question. Because if he was, continued Miss Beaver, then she'll simply sledge down in that direction and get between us and the stone table and catch us on our way down. In fact, we shall be cut off from Aslan. But that isn't what she'll do first, said Mrs. Beaver. Not if I know her. The moment that Edmund tells her that we're all here, she'll set out to catch us this very night. And if he's been gone about an hour, she'll be here in about another 20 minutes. You're right, Mrs. Beaver, said her husband. We must all get away from here. There's not a moment to lose.